Hi, welcome to Cape Conversations. I'm Melinda Gallant, and I've got a great show for you today, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm interviewing Robert Patrick Ellis of the famous Ellis family of Sandwich, and I am so excited. We're at his house at 2 River Street, which is really kind of got neat history. So come along, let's have a Cape Conversation. So hi, here I am today with the fabulous, wonderful man about town, Robert Patrick, well, if I can get it out, Robert Patrick Ellis of the famous Ellis family of Sandwich, Massachusetts, a Sandwichian by birth.
I was actually born in Wareham, but...
Really?
Yes.
On the other side of the bridge? Toby Hospital?
Yes, Toby
Hospital.
Hospital.
You're not a Cape Codder then,
no,
are you?
not at all.
No, there you go.
Nope.
Well, we're sitting on the front porch of your house, and was this your first house?
Yes, it was. Purchased in 1981.
Really, really.
Yeah.
Now tell me the story about the house, because it sits on River Street, which how did River Street get its name, I wonder?
Crossing over the river.
Which is that little
Which
creek.
is Mill Creek.
Right, okay.
And this was the site of a bakery for over 150 years. Served as a town bakery, and under 6 or 7 different owners.
And so when was the house built?
It's built in 2 different stages. The older section of the house is probably mid-17th century.
Wow.
And the front part of the house was built by the Dow family in 1890, and they built the barn in 1894.
Is that right? That's great. And you lived here, did you tell me you didn't tell me this, that you lived here without heat?
Yeah, when we first moved here, I had a private tree business, so wood was plentiful.
There you go.
We had been in heating with wood all through college, so we were accustomed to it. So we had 2 wood stoves and lived here without heat for a decade.
Is that right? And you had your kids here?
I had our kids here.
And they were none worse the wear for it?
None worse for wear. They learned to check the stove like everyone else.
That's good. Yep. You know, nowadays you couldn't have a wood-burning stove like that unless you had a cage around it, because they'd be afraid the kids would touch it. And my theory was they would only do it once.
That's right.
You know? It's like running into something. Well, they'll only do it once. Fall down the steps, they'll only do it once.
That's right.
You know? That'll be the end, and then they won't fall down again. But anyway, so tell me, Patrick, you have been a lot of things to the community of Sandwich. You've done, were the first tree warden, or were you a tree warden?
I was a tree warden. Okay. I was one of first tree wardens in Massachusetts were in 1893. Really? That was when the tree warden's position was established, and there's been a continual tree warden since then. Is that right?
And tell me about, I mean, I know you planted a lot of trees. I've lived here for 30-some years, so I know that since I've been here, certainly new trees have been planted, but there are some really pretty famous trees in Sandwich, aren't there?
Yeah, Sandwich was fortunate because we've always had consistent support for public shade trees. We're probably at our lowest level of support today, like we are with most government things.
Right.
But we were fortunate because my Uncle Bill, William J. Ellis, was tree warden, and he was my very first mentor, you know, in the working world.
Mm-hmm. Was he one of those guys that had their name on a mug over at the Daniel Webster?
No, he probably wouldn't have done that.
Okay.
No,
Must have been another Ellis.
He would never have paid for the mug. Not if the beer came cold in a bottle.
Yeah, there you go.
So he...
he wasn't one.
No, he wasn't one.
We can move on from that.
Yeah. But he was way ahead of his time, self-taught.
Is that right?
Tree person.
Neat.
Was very involved on the statewide level with his fellow tree wardens.
Uh-huh.
And I followed him into that, and was eventually I was president of Mass Tree Wardens and Foresters.
Oh, wow.
Because of his involvement. So he was ahead of his time in the sense that most towns throughout the 70s were taking down elm trees that had died from Dutch elm disease.
Yeah.
And that was their effort.
So they took down the tree and didn't plant anything?
Didn't plant anything.
Oh, dear.
Bill was always planting one for one.
Yeah.
With everything that he would take down. When he took something down, he had an idea of something that was to be planted there. He never gave in to pushes from elected officials and well-meaning civic groups who wish to plant many more trees than you should plant.
Yeah.
His philosophy was always, and mine was, plant what you can maintain and plant what you can perpetuate.
Sure.
Because you're doing this for another generation. So
Right.
to short circuit the investment, it would be like not buying diapers for your kids.
Well, but I got a question. So what trees around town did he plant that we could be enjoying now?
Well, almost any tree that is along Main Street or
Really?
Jarvis Street or anything within the roadway, within the sidewalk would have been planted by the town.
Is that right? Wow. Wow. Those trees are huge.
Oh yeah, and it takes a while. I mean, you see trees that I planted in, say, the early 80s that are just now becoming, what we would call majestic shade trees. They'd be pole size.
Did you plant the trees along Tupper Road from 6A to
My Uncle
Main Street?
Bill did plant those.
Okay.
I planted the trees that are on Merchants Road today.
Oh, okay.
That was a grant that we received from the state.
And those
to
are now just
specifically
starting
plant-
to look.
It's just starting to.
Yeah,
and
take off.
And the fact that Chew has become the signature business there.
Yeah.
At the same time that these trees are coming into their own is not a coincidence.
Right.
I mean, they framed that site. At one point, prior to that planting, there wasn't a single tree between Tupper Road and Route 6A.
Right, right.
Not a single tree.
Well, I remember when they built the whole area.
Yeah. I actually lost a bet. I didn't think that the Angelo's store would stay open its first winter. I lost a $1 bet.
And we all still call it Angelo's, which is a sign of something.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it's a sign of something. But
Yes, we're not going to talk
I'm
about
not sure what,
That's true.
what we would call it.
So tell me about some of the famous trees here in town. I mean,
I would think the most famous tree in town is in John Shaw's yard, the big ginkgo that's
the big
next to
ginkgo
his
there,
house.
right? Which he
That I
talked
would
to us
say.
about.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yes.
I got to interview him,
Yes.
and that is such a gorgeous
Yeah,
tree.
so that's a fabulous property, and
Yeah.
John's a great steward of.
Oh, he is.
trees
Yeah,
and
of
plants.
the history of the town and all of that. Are there others around town?
Well,
you
I
know?
think there are a number of trees. We had a particularly outstanding tree warden at about the turn of the century whose name was Benjamin Denson. And he was way ahead of his time in the sense that it wasn't until the 70s that tree wardens were being encouraged to do tree inventories or develop maps of their town and actually quantify the number of trees that you maintain. And largely that was for an effort to convince finance committees and selectmen that it was an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
First thing you do is define the asset that you have to maintain and then convince somebody you should do it.
Right.
Well, Denson obviously wasn't motivated by that, or perhaps he was, but by 1910 he had completed an inventory of public shade trees in Sandwich that we
Really?
still have a copy of, and there are still significant trees from 1910
Here.
that are on there.
Wow.
For example, at the very top of School Street, when you can just see the Hoxie House, you look to your right, there are two larch, which are unusual deciduous evergreens that are on that map from 1910.
Is that right?
Yeah, many
Wow.
of the catalpas that were given out by a classroom teacher are on there as well.
Is that right? Oh my gosh. Now, I know we're sitting here on your front porch and there's a monarch butterfly flying around. There has got to be the most gorgeous female holly tree I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, this is a nice holly.
It is beautiful. Now, did you plant that or was it already
I
here?
did not. It was here when we bought the property. It was probably, I would think, planted by the Dows.
Absolutely beautiful.
Or even Roy Davis, who lived here from about 1948 till the mid-70s.
Absolutely beautiful. Do you know that, I know with the glass works that was here, where did they get the wood for that? Did they take the wood from the town or
One
for
of
the
the
fires,
reasons
or?
why they were attracted to come here was pine forests.
Oh, that were here.
And the fact that the pine burns at a much higher temperature than oak.
Right.
So they knew they could use that as a fuel
Because it's a soft
source
wood,
for
right?
glass.
Yeah.
And because of the resins in it that make
Oh.
it burn much hotter, like pitch.
Oh, the pitch pine. Oh,
The
sure.
pitch,
That makes
would make
sense,
it burn
yeah.
that much hotter. So they were right on one score in that they could use the fuel wood, but what they couldn't use was the sand.
Oh, because it was too rough?
No, I think it had too high a quartz content,
I see.
so it just didn't make good glass. So they ended up having to import the sand
Is that right?
from either New Jersey or Dover, England.
Right.
And then that threw the thing upside down.
Right. I certainly know that at one time at the Glass Museum, and I have pictures that actually is a copy of a picture that came from your dad, your family's, and your mom who's still living, the top of the garage, which I think there are great treasures in there still, I'm sure. But it's a copy of one of the furnaces for the glass factory.
That were big.
And it was huge, and I kept thinking, how much fuel would you have to put into that to get it
And
to
were
work?
never turned off.
Yeah, they had to be on all the time.
They had to be
right?
on all the
24
time.
hours a day. I mean,
Which is
absolutely
why
amazing.
the factory closed down, and because Mr. Jarvis said that if they went on strike, if the boilers ever went out,
That's it.
they would never be lit again.
And he
And they went on strike, and the boilers went out, and they were never lit again.
kept his promise. Well, and also the other.
Imagine what it must have been like then in a factory like that. Imagine how many people lost arms.
Oh,
Imagine how many people were
Burned.
burned beyond recognition. Imagine how
sure.
many people died just in the
Sure.
course of. But we tend to romanticize the past into thinking
Right.
that that was an inherently good thing.
right,
But if it was your dad who died in the mill, you wouldn't think it was a good thing.
right, right.
So,
Well, especially back then. I mean, it
Yeah.
was. I mean, there have been recessions throughout time, depressions and recessions. So, you know, what our economy is going through now is probably not unlike what the economy went through back at certain times then.
Oh,
For
yeah.
them to go out on strike, looking for probably some sort of workers' rights, and at that time, of course, we all know that there were no workers' rights.
That's right.
So that that to me
well,
is
Sandwich
amazing.
was a bustling 5,000 population
Yeah.
town then.
And that was big.
And by the time I graduated in high school in 1971, it was just under 2,000.
Is that right? Well, it's now bustling again.
Yes. Yeah, we bustled.
We bustled.
We bustled back to life in the 80s.
Yes, we did. Well, a lot of wash-ashores, of which I'm one. A lot of people I know certainly
We
are
are too. Yeah,
wash-ashores.
we're two-boat wash-ashores.
Is that right?
Yes.
What does that mean, two boats?
Two-boat
Did you-
Irish.
So big that you had to come in
No,
with
the
two boats?
two-boat Irish were the ones that came to America by way of Nova Scotia. They
Oh,
took
that's
the first,
my husband's family.
They took the first boat to Nova Scotia. Now, the reason why they went to Nova Scotia was because they could.
Right.
You could legally go from one part of the English Commonwealth to another, like
another.
you can today. You can go from Bermuda to England. You can go from Canada to England.
Right.
So they legally came to Nova Scotia. And then, when they could pony up enough money, they all met a fisherman down at the wharf on a foggy night in probably Andrews, Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Irish climbed down into the hold of the fishing boat
And came.
and were taken to Newburyport, Massachusetts.
So they
where
were
my
smuggled
relative-
in.
They were illegal immigrants is what they were.
That's right, they were.
Tell it like it is.
And you know what? Isn't it a wonderful thing that you guys got here? But we
Yes.
don't allow that today.
No. Well, no, today we allow it. We just take retribution against the children.
Children, that's right. That's right. That's true. So, so that's what's meant by two-boat Irish.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
that's great. That's a good story.
That's why I have that feeling I have about immigration, because if you take two lists and apply them against each other, it doesn't match. Those who came in legally, and where the heck did the rest of these
Those
people come from?
Right, right, right.
I mean, there's just not enough names on the
No.
Ellis Island Register here.
Well, that's true. And look at all the people that have come and have done such wonderful things.
It's what
here.
makes this country great.
It is. And you know what?
It was.
It was something I recently heard on television. It was, there's no other country that you can go into and you can become an American. You can take the test, you can learn the stuff, become an American. You can't go to China and become Chinese. You can't go to Thailand and become Taiwanese or Thailandese. You have to
That's right.
be them to do that. And here, we welcome even if you don't look exactly like us. And in some cases, it's probably an improvement if you don't.
Yes.
So anyway, So among your other things that you've done too, besides be tree warden, is you were selectman of the town? Is that
I was
correct?
a selectman, and then previous.
God love you.
Oh, previous to that, that's a thankless job, being a selectman.
Yeah.
But it's also a challenging job, and it's a leadership position. And if I have one criticism of it, I would say that our selectmen have been far too popular in the past, and not many good things come to the town out of the popularity of the Board of Selectmen.
No, you can't.
Good things come out of
because
not being popular, because
Right.
leadership is taking people where they otherwise would not go.
that's correct.
So I think, we traded a lot of really popular selectmen for having a bunch of buildings that aren't fixed up, and efforts that are incomplete.
Right. So now you are on the town. You helped. I know you were key in getting the town hall renovated and
Yeah, I had always
restored.
wanted that. Thought that was the signature building that it is now.
People's meeting hall upstairs.
And
Fabulous
just
spot.
always wanted that. I proposed it to the town in '99 as a selectman. And it failed by a matter of a few votes at town meeting. But it was probably our good fortune then, because
Yeah.
it would have been challenged from the beginning monetarily, and it
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have been as successful as
Right.
as what we did.
Right.
The next effort came out of the Community Preservation Act, so it was
Sure.
a funding source, and
Sure.
it made sense to do it
Sure.
when we did it.
And
But I'm really proud of that. That's
oh,
something the town
it's gorgeous.
really just.
It is not only a beautiful place for our town employees, the people who work for the community of Sandwich, but it's also upstairs, that beautiful meeting hall that can be
Yes.
used for all different kinds of functions and whatever.
Yep.
Fabulous. I mean, it's
Yep.
just a wonderful, wonderful
It sure
space. And
is.
you know what? It shows that the town, in some cases, town fathers, town leaders, have foresight to know that you have to restore the past and give it to the future, and for future generations.
And the people
know?
deserve a lot of credit for passing the Community Preservation Act
Absolutely, they do.
right away.
Yeah.
It took one vote at town meeting.
Boom, we're done.
We're done.
Yeah. And now you sit on the town hall, the Friends of the Town Hall committee.
Yeah, we're in the process of starting
getting that
a Friends
organized,
of the Town Hall,
right.
which would be equivalent to sort of the Friends of the Library. If we could ever be that successful, we'd
Yeah.
be doing really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're a great group to emulate.
Yeah, they are. Boy, they
And
have some strong members,
They
that's
do,
for sure.
and they've done great things for the town.
Yeah, they have.
So I think that it will grow into a much more useful
Right.
building than it is now.
Now, this isn't the only property you own in Sandwich, though, correct?
No, I moved out on my children.
Because you left the kids here, right?
We left the kids here.
You were a smart man.
Our older
You're a
children.
very smart man.
And moved to 28 Spring Hill Road.
Fabulous. Oh, next
is
to
nice.
the famous TV anchorman,
Yes, just down the street from Texas Tom Ellis.
Texas Tom Ellis. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, who's a good friend.
yeah. And what are you going to do with that property? You're just going to
I bought it with the intention of doing a small farm
really
of strawberries and vegetables.
excellent. So does that mean that I can when I retire, I can become a Crow Farm? I can become an Ellis farm worker.
That's possible.
I wanted to go to Crow Farm, but those
Depending
women
on
tell me
how-
they're not going to retire.
Depending
So.
on the wage scale, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Well, minimum
could
wage,
afford
free,
to. Yeah,
volunteer.
exactly.
I'll volunteer. Don't tell my husband I said that. He'd
exactly.
shoot me dead. So anyway, so that's what you're going to do. And why that? I mean, why do you have all this love of greenery?
I'm not sure why.
Flora and fauna.
But I was always doing this. I think when I was 10 years old, I was walking through the neighborhood selling my vegetables out of my garden, out of a wagon.
Yeah.
I always liked growing.
Sure.
My Uncle
sure.
Bill was, as I said, he was a great mentor. He had, the incredible green thumb, loved it.
Right.
And I went off to Stockbridge School after having worked for him.
Oh, you did? I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
So is that where you graduated
I was
from?
in between Cape Cod Community College,
Uh-huh.
where I went for liberal arts,
Mm-hmm.
and then I took a year off to just sort of,
Find
as
yourself.
we said, find ourselves
That's
back in
right.
the 70s.
Yeah.
And then went to work for Bill in a fall tree planting program on a part-time job, and it just clicked, and it was something I wanted to do.
Oh, that's great. So then you ended up, did you graduate from Stockbridge?
Then I went back and graduated from Stockbridge School of Agriculture.
Wow. That's great. Good
Yeah.
for you.
And then I came back to Sandwich
Didn't you graduate from UMass, I thought, though?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Stockbridge is part of UMass.
Oh, that's right. That's
we
right.
actually
I'm
allowed
sorry.
UMass to join us on.
Is that right?
It was the Mass Agricultural College, and then it was
Actually,
then it was Stockbridge, and then it was UMass.
my son-in-law is a golf course superintendent. And of course, UMass has the #1 program in the country for
They
golf
do.
course superintendents.
Well, the School of Natural
And
Resources
that's
at UMass is the best. in the
Unbelievable. But I think he started off at Stockbridge as well. I mean, I think
country.
that's how he got
you go
into
to Stockbridge, and then you can rotate into
Yeah,
a 4-year.
that's-
You
that's-
could. When I was there, they only had a 2-year arboriculture
it. Yeah,
program.
I think that's how
So
he
now
did
they
it.
can go to a 4-year
Wow.
school.
Good. And so then what happened?
So then what happened was coming out of school, I was a good student and was popular and had an opportunity to...
excuse me. I'm so glad you have time for us today.
Yeah, that's
Popular.
okay. It's okay. But I had companies that were after me, and I turned down jobs to come back to Sandwich to work for my Uncle Bill.
Oh.
And that was in June of 1979.
Is that before or after you met your wife?
Now, we were married already.
All right.
So we came back to Sandwich, and I began work for the town on or about June 1 of that year.
Is that right?
And on November 2nd of that year, Proposition 2.5 passed, and I
Yeah.
was laid off the next day. So there I was, having just finished college.
And you were a hot shot, too.
Married. I think Jane was pregnant, and no job. No, Jane wasn't pregnant. But that was the best thing that happened to me because it forced me to go into my own business.
There you go.
And I ran my own business. I ran my own business for the next 7 years. And then I ran into the current selectman then, who had been an English teacher of mine, Bruce Stanford.
Oh, you're kidding.
And Bruce encouraged me to consider the highway job. The highway superintendent had just resigned,
Yeah.
and it was going to be an open election for that
You
position.
were a good DPW director. Our streets were cleared, the potholes were filled, and the trees looked great, I'm telling you.
I loved that job. But I will admit that one of my shortcomings is a lack of attention. And I have about a 10-year window of
Attention span.
enthusiasm. And then it wanes and I have to move on.
How long have you
So,
been married?
35 years.
Okay, well, thank God the attention span's okay on that area.
Oh yeah, on that end it's fine. I have to say, that's not a problem. But as far as career goes, everything I've done has been in like tens. I ran my own business for 10 years, and then I went to work for the town as public works superintendent for 10 years. Then I was recruited to go to work for a private company.
For 10 years?
Then I became an owner, and then once I was at the 10-year period, I sold my shares, and
said, see ya.
now I'm off on another adventure.
So now you're going to be the adventurous farmer of Spring Hill.
Yes.
I love it. I think that's great. So when should we expect to be getting our vegetables and our strawberries
I
from
really
you?
don't know.
You're not open yet.
I'm not open, and I'm probably at least 5 years away from that.
Well, okay, well, just make sure you don't wait too long because I'll be too old to work in the fields.
That's true. I don't think you're ever too
old to work in the fields?
No, I think that's something
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yes.
Anyway, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us not only about your life, the trees here in town, all the wonderful kind of history of the town of Sandwich.
We're fortunate to live here. I always say that. We're fortunate to live here. I think the fact that the community has grown and people have moved here. I was fortunate. My mother and father were always very welcoming to people who moved here.
Mm-hmm.
They loved the new people who moved here. So as a family, we were all, that was indoctrinated into our way of thinking that
I want to be an Ellis. I've told people that.
What makes the community so rich is that diversity.
Absolutely.
Because the other dynamic we have of Sandwich that people are just haven't even discovered yet is that we are truly a transient community in the sense that very few people live here for their whole lives anymore.
Oh, no.
They live here for the period of time their children are in school.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they move on. The majority of people only live here for about a 20-year period. And then their house rolls over and another family moves in.
Right, right.
But I believe that contributes to the richness of it.
Oh, I do too.
Culturally,
I do too.
And
And it also
really important.
don't you also think though it helps us grow as a community on who we are. It's not that I always agree with everybody new coming in or everybody who's lived here forever either, but it just helps us grow and to rethink things. And maybe, well, maybe there's an idea. Well, we haven't tried that, so let's do that. And
my father would say,
know?
don't forget, these people chose to live here.
Right.
You didn't. You were born here.
Well, see,
You're
that's
fortunate to be here. These people chose. And when people choose to live here, it's usually in combination with the largest single capital investment they'll ever make in
sure,
their
by
lives,
buying
the
a
purchase
house.
of a home.
Right.
So it's a very grounded decision when people decide to move to a community.
So many people have said to me, oh gosh, so lucky to live in Sandwich, Massachusetts on
I
Cape
feel
Cod, and I don't feel lucky because we chose to live here.
Yes.
I mean, it was it was a huge conscious effort. So, Patrick Ellis, Robert Patrick Ellis. I like RP Ellis, your email address. That's very cool.
I got sent to the office on the first day of school because of that.
What?
I didn't answer to my name, Robert Ellis, when.
Oh.
So Mrs. Strain announced all the children's names of everyone in the class. And she, at one point, said Robert Ellis, but I never answered to it because they always called me Patrick, Patty, Pat, whatever. And so she said, if I have not called your name, raise your hand. And I raised my hand.
And you got in trouble.
And she said, you wise little thing. Took me by my ear right to the principal's. I sat on the principal's bench until my mother got to school to explain to me that my name was Robert Patrick Ellis.
Because you thought it was Patrick. Well, how would you know? You're a kid.
And I ended up liking Mrs. Strain many years later.
That's good. That's a good story, too. All right, Patrick
good.
Ellis, so nice to
Thank
be
you,
with you
Melinda.
on your front porch. Thank you for the iced tea as well. We love the renovations you're doing in the inside. I wish you the best of luck. Another entrepreneurial investment and adventure, right? Life is an adventure.
Yes, it is.
And don't forget to hold a position for me working in the fields. Just a couple of years when you're ready.
Very
you
good.
know, I'm
All
good,
right.
and I can even do the horses. You know, I do have
Nice.
experience in that as
Very
well.
good.
So, anyway,
All right.
thank
Well,
you so much.
very much.
It's great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. This wonderful conversation with Pat Ellis at his home on River Street. Wow, wasn't it great to learn about all the old trees in town and what they're about, and some of the old stories about the glass factory, and even knowing about how the selectmen work and all of that, because he's done so many things in town. It was just great to get to know him. So I hope you'll join me next time for a Cape Conversation.